Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Hey, with you for another episode of the Steelers Preview. That's where we break down the upcoming contest, and that's this week's huge game. As I labeled it in the title of this episode, it is a statement game, I believe, for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Could be for the Baltimore Ravens, too. Week 5 is going to be interesting, to say the least, and with me, as always, is the dynamic duo that makes up the tremendous trio, Bryan Anthony Davis. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Jefferson. Thanks for having me, and I'm loving this week, and I love Ravens week. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Dave Schofield, what's going on?
Oh, I feel like I got to eat a little bit of humble pie. I got to give a shout out to Bryan. I gave him a hard time Monday night on The Hangover and told him that there was better songs from 1983 than 1984. Why I do stand by my comment that the best songs are better. There was a lot more depth to the songs in '84 when something like Caribbean Queen isn't even the top 50. So kudos, Bryan. There are a lot of good songs in 1984.
Oh, all right. I did not. I was not partaking in that conversation. So that sounds like that was between you two. Nonetheless, let's get the show started. There's a lot to talk about with the Pittsburgh Steelers. In terms of news, the biggest news is, in my opinion, the injury report. The injury report has been big for the Steelers, not so much for the Ravens. Dave, why don't you give us a quick rundown of the injuries that the Steelers are facing going into Week 5 this Sunday at Heinz Field?
Well, they had a pleasant surprise somewhat of a surprise, getting Vince Williams back yesterday, coming off of his hamstring injury that he was a full participant for 2 days now. There was 3 players that played this past week that ended up not practicing yesterday in James Conner and with his a knee? I'm forgetting what his was. Cam Hayward with a quadricep and Juju Smith-Schuster with a toe. Now, Cam Hayward came back today as a full participant, but James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster have both sat out the last 2 days. So that's concerning. Still no Vance McDonald back at all. Still no Anthony Chickillo back. And, of course, still no Roosevelt Nix.
Well, Nix isn't going to play, but
No.
The coaching staff seems to be, at least they're speaking positively of both the trio of Conner, Smith-Schuster, and McDonald all being available this Sunday. But as they said, Friday is a big day. They have to practice in some shape or form on Friday, or else they're not going to play. That's just Mike Tomlin. That's the way he's always been. Is if you don't practice at all, then you're probably not going to play. Now, Bryan, let me ask you this: of those 3 players, Juju, James Conner, and Vance McDonald, which one do you think is the biggest in terms of they need to have him on the field this Sunday?
You know, a lot of people will disagree with Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he really needs to step up. Mason Rudolph said, I need to get him the ball more. And so he definitely needs, he only had 3 receptions, but he was really going to help drive the bus for this entire team. Going forward, we saw what we can do. Jalen Samuels in at running back. Connor's. We also saw what we can do at tight end as well with a replacement. So I'm going with Juju.
Dave, do you agree or disagree?
I'm going to agree with that one with Juju because even going back and looking at Deontay Johnson's touchdown this past week, they ran a deep cross with him and Juju, and there was 3 defenders back there. And what did they do? They all jumped to Juju. They were all scared to death of him. They're focusing so much on him that it's opening things up for other guys. That's how Johnson was wide open. So without Juju, then you really have to worry about something like that. But I think he'll be back. I think he'll play. Out of those 3, I'm the most concerned about him not playing, but I also think out of the 3, he has the best chance of playing.
Last night on The Standard is a Standard with Lance Williams. If you haven't heard it, I definitely recommend you check it out. I thought it was a really good show. We talked about the possibility of having both Vanette and McDonald out there at the same time in 2 tight end sets, and that can be that could be a really good look for this Steelers team moving forward based on the fact that they can run out of those packages. They can still throw because both of them can catch the ball. Both of them are, I think Vanette's a little bit more athletic than McDonald, but we know what McDonald can do with the ball in his hands. I'm not disagreeing with you all. But at the same time, I think McDonald getting back could really help this team. And he could really help them in this game in particular. Protection, running the football, things that the Steelers are going to need to do to be successful against the Ravens. So that's where I'm going to add my 2 cents in that respect. So what about the Ravens, Dave? What's going on over on the other side of the fence?
On the other side of the fence, we have Jimmy Smith. That's their cornerback, right?
Yeah, the knee, right?
Yeah, he has not practiced at all this week. Their center was a new addition to the injury report who did not practice today with a knee. And defensive tackle Brandon Williams was out yesterday, but he was limited today. So he's progressing in the right direction for them. But Thursday always kind of gives you an idea of where things are going, but Friday's always the key.
Yeah, absolutely. But Jimmy Smith, I mean, some might say that he's on the wrong end of, getting up in age, but at the same time, he's a starting defensive back for the Ravens and has been there for a long time. So if he's not in, that's definitely going to be something that's going to help the Steelers in terms of their passing attack. Okay, so let's get right into the thick of things here. I want to ask you guys just a very general question. No one, in my opinion, I can't say no one, but I don't think there's definitely none of us on the show here predicted the game plan that was deployed on on Monday night against the Bengals in Week 4. We didn't. No one thought that the Wildcat was going to be brought out. No one saw jet sweep after jet sweep. No one saw basically what Mason Rudolph said today during his media session was, we like the matchup of our running backs against their linebackers. And that's exactly what they did. And so while Mason Rudolph has been criticized up and down the BehindTheSteelCurtain.com comment section and nationally for not throwing the ball down the field, he executed the game plan to perfection. And that was get the ball to the running backs on the linebackers of Cincinnati and watch them win those matchups. And they did. If you were to try to take a stab in the dark and you're taking a look at the Ravens defense, the Steelers offense, what do you think the offensive approach is going to be for this Sunday, 1 o'clock Eastern time at Heinz Field? Dave, we'll start with you in terms of the Steelers offensive game plan.
I expect the unexpected, because that's what we learned last week, is that we went from where something happened that we weren't planning on. If you try to plan on them coming out to the exact same thing, I think we're going to be surprised again. That's what I had the biggest problem with after San Francisco was, come on, just throw something else out there, do something new. And they did something new. So I'm kind of hoping that they're going to look for something else new.
Any guess on what that might be?
I'm hoping it's taking some deep shots, because I think they've kind of set up teams to play the defense against them that it should open it up. But I don't know if that's going to be a sustainable game plan all the time, but maybe just a complete mix up of everything. I mean, I wouldn't mind just seeing some. I kind of think about this. I'm gonna go all reminiscent on you guys. The last football game I ever coached was, I had a team that I did not have a very good offensive line. We ran spread, shotgun, quick pass all year because we couldn't block anybody. Well, the week before going into our final game, we decided to put in a goal line offense in case we got down close. And we just compacted everything in and I had my linemen put their feet right next to each other and just ran it with zero splits and just bulldozed. We came out and we did so well in practice. They're like, hey, we should try this. We came out with a whole new game plan and ended up winning that game against the team we were supposed to get crushed by, all because we just changed everything up, because we did something they completely weren't expecting. And that's what the Steelers did Monday. And I don't know what else they can come up with. So I don't really know, but I'm hoping they do something.
Bryan, what are your thoughts?
I'm hoping for a lot of play action. We're seeing more and more of it. Not as much as we'd like, but that's getting mixed in. But, Dave said that they need to go deep. Everybody's asking them to go deep. Even Randy Feet, he could have gone deep against San Francisco missing guys, which I kind of didn't didn't appreciate. But I really think Mason Rudolph is a deep passer. He ranked fourth in the nation, up with guys like Baker Mayfield in 2017, his final season in college at Oklahoma State. And I really think this is a guy that could go ahead and, if he just throws that in a little more, especially early, to keep him honest. But don't do it to Johnny Holton.
Well, I mean, I agree with you that targeting Johnny Holton it's a sin in my opinion, but at the same time, he's the guy that's drawing one-on-one coverage, and so Mason Rudolph declared him as a burner, and I think he is probably the fastest receiver that they have. Deontay Johnson might be up there too, and he saw one-on-one coverage. He's trying to get a play and make a play, and so I understand that from that standpoint. Bryan, you said play action pass. The thing that is about play action is that you have to have people actually think you're going to run the ball for it to work. And so doing the jet sweep and stuff was very intelligent for the Steelers in week 4 because it got their running backs on the edge, and it was a matchup they definitely won. But when it comes to running in the interior, it's still been very, very bad. And so the Steelers need it. They need to somehow find a way to, even if it's just 3-4 yards a clip, get them moving the ball in between the tackle box a little bit better, getting some push. That's when you can really go for broke over the top, and we'll see how that works. Let's go into our stat geek now. Dave, you said you had a stat geek for us, correct?
Oh yeah, I've been diving into some very interesting stuff with wow, did we just lose Bryan?
I think his hand's over the camera.
Okay, hopefully he can still hear us. So, very interesting stuff with the Ravens and where they come. What last week was interesting because the Cincinnati Bengals, going into the game, they were third in the league in passing. They were third in the league in passing, but the Steelers holding them to what was it, 102 passing yards when you take off all the sacks. That was the third lowest passing output of any game this season. So that caused them to drop from third to 13th just last week. Now, right now, the strength of the Baltimore Ravens is their running game. And we know that that's what the Steelers are going to have to try to slow down, because the Ravens currently, they average 205.75 rushing yards per game. That's a lot. Do you guys have any idea the last time a team went the entire season and averaged 200 yards rushing in a game or per game?
An entire season?
Where they did it over the entire season?
I feel like that's got to be back in like the 70s because that's when they just ran the ball. You talking about a Pittsburgh team or just any team?
Well, believe it or not, the last team to do it was not a Pittsburgh team, but the time before that was a Pittsburgh team. There was a Pittsburgh team that averaged over 200 yards per season. Do you know which year that was for the Steelers?
That's a Bryan.
That's a Bryan question.
I would probably think Blyer and Harris days, so let's go 76. But I was thinking before that, the Miami Dolphins.
The Miami Dolphins were close. We'll talk about the Dolphins in a little bit with something else. But it was the 76 Steelers. You are correct. Before that, more recently was the 77 Chicago Bears. But what's crazy is this has never happened since they've gone to a 16-game season, because they went to the 16-game season in 78. So there's never been a team that's averaged 200 yards in a 16-game season. Hopefully it's not going to be the Steelers. But just so you guys know, just a little thing that I dug up. All-time history, the most rushing yards per game in an entire season is the 1948 San Francisco 49ers with 260.9 rushing yards per game. That technically was the AAFC, not even the NFL. But one other thing I did want to say about this is I stumbled onto something really interesting, that the Ravens are on a crazy streak of the number of regular season games in a row with at least 150 yards rushing a game. They have 11 straight games of 150 yards rushing in a row. Now, it's regular season because last year in the playoffs, they did not even reach 100 yards rushing in that game against San Diego. But if you go back, it's been 11 straight games. Any idea who the last team was that held the Ravens to under 150 yards rushing?
Pittsburgh Steelers.
That would be the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. That was week 9. They held them to 61 yards rushing. That was the last Baltimore start by one Flacco. Before their bye what? Sorry, before their bye week, and so therefore, Lamar Jackson in every start that he's had in the regular season, they've rushed for at least 150 yards. But that's 11 straight games. If they do it again this week, which we got to hope they didn't, they will tie the 72-73 Dolphins with 12 consecutive games of rushing for 150 yards. That would be for second place because first place belongs to the 1975-76 Pittsburgh Steelers. They have 14 games in a row, regular season games in a row of rushing it of games with at least 150 yards rushing. So that's kind of some crazy stats I threw out there. So the Steelers started this streak. I'd like to see him end it. I know last night Lance Williams says, "Oh, the Ravens are going to win," which we'll talk about that later. And he said, "And they're going to get 100 yards rushing." You know, Lance, if they only get 100 yards rushing, that's a win for the Steelers. They'll crush the Ravens if all they get is 100 yards. So what you need to do is hold them under 150 yards, or even, definitely under 200 yards, because that's the kind of rushing stats they put up this year.
That's very interesting stuff, and every now and then you get these games, and the Steelers are as guilty as anybody, where you go into it thinking they're going to try to run, and they do the complete opposite. It's almost as if they say in the meetings, they'll never expect us to come out just throwing the ball around the yard. There's a part of me that thinks that that's what the Ravens are going to do early in the game. They're going to come out and they're not going to try to run it. They're going to throw it. They're going to throw it often. They're going to get Lamar Jackson on the edge and give him some space. Bryan, what are your thoughts on how the Ravens offense might approach this game?
You know what? I agree with you completely, Jeff. But here's the thing, that we are discounting the fact that Andy Dalton was averaging over 330 yards a game before he ran into Pittsburgh. And all of a sudden, the Pittsburgh Steelers have found a secondary by adding Minkah Fitzpatrick. And Minkah has made Terrell. And it's going to be a lot tougher for them to go deep, getting Hollywood Brown deep like he did against the Dolphins. So they could try that, but they might have to go back to the run early because that could be shut down now.
No, that's true. And I can't underscore, and I want to go back and watch some film, but it just seemed like the secondary was on. It seemed like they were communicating better. We'll put it that way in week 4. And I have to credit some of that to Minkah Fitzpatrick. And Mike Tomlin gave him some very high praise in regards to his ability to pick up the system quickly. And he said now they're starting to go into some of the in-depth schematic aspects of the safety position. So, Dave, what are your thoughts on Minkah Fitzpatrick's second game with the Steelers?
I loved never hearing his name. That just tells you that it's kind of like an offensive lineman. You don't want to hear their name during the game because it's usually not for a good thing. You don't want to hear them even making a bunch of tackles because that means that ball carriers are getting that far into the defense. He didn't really do much from a statistical standpoint, which meant he did his job. So I think it's fantastic. I think you're right. That's why it was so exciting to see what's going on in this game, because the question is that so many people were asking, was it just because it was the Bengals? Was it because it was the Bengals? I don't know. I'm hoping that it's not, but I'm glad they did what they did against the Bengals because that was dominant. But to go back to what you said about, will the Ravens come out and just pass the ball? If they do, you're going to see them passing the ball to their tight ends in the middle of the field, because the Steelers seem to really have everything locked up, especially, on the outside and in the deep middle, that you're going to see short middle passes. I'll be honest with you. If I was the Steelers, I would bring Terrell Edmonds way up and just dare the Ravens to pass it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. There's definitely going to be a chess match going on, and the first quarter of the game could definitely, I could see it being a feeling out session between the offense and defense on both sides, and kind of getting a feel for, okay, how are they going to handle this? What are they going to do? What are they going to try to do? How are they going to respond? If the Ravens come out in a lot of 11 personnel, what are the Steelers deploying? I'm curious to see what Vince Williams does. And Bryan, we'll go to you with this question. If Vince Williams is deemed healthy, how are you utilizing the inside linebackers in Week 5?
Well, you know what I'm definitely using Vince Williams and lurking in the middle there, using Devin Bush more to drop back a little bit more than every once in a while, send them in like they did, but use him as a defender against the pass. Now, I know as soon as I say that, I'm going to get people to jump in on he's too small to cover tight ends, but he really isn't. I mean, he is very good in coverage as well.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think the Ravens might try to get some personnel packages to get Vince Williams off the field for when they want to run the ball, because I think that he is obviously their best run stopping linebacker. They're going to try to get him on the field for when they want to pass it so they can get him in pass coverage. That's just kind of what you want to try to do. So I think the Steelers got to mix it up a little bit with when they're utilizing him. But I don't know that their offense is that diversified enough that they can pull that off. So what I think is going to be interesting is going to be the division of labor. I mean, who's going to come off? Before this past week, it was easy. It's Mark Barron's just not going to see nearly as many snaps. Mark Barron had a pretty decent game last week. So I still think he's going to be the guy that's going to come off some, but I just think that no linebacker is going to be playing 100% of the snaps or close to 100% of the snaps like last year.
It's going to be one of those positions to keep an eye on, and there might be situations where they try to keep, especially with their tight ends, they try to keep Vince on the field, and they want the Steelers in their base package so that they can utilize him and his weaknesses in pass coverage. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to break down this game the way we always do. We're going to talk about it from an X's, and like, for instance, we're going to start with the X factor, who we think is that one player that we think is going to be crucial or critical to the success of the Steelers. Let's start with you, Bryan. When looking at this matchup, who do you think is the X factor in this game on Sunday?
I never do this, but I'm going to say Mason Rudolph. And the reason I'm going to go ahead and say that is because, look, he's the one that is driving this machine right now. He took some criticism for the dink and dunk, and hey, I don't care. 24 of 28 is an effective game. What they needed to do. We still want to see him go downfield. We know we talked about going downfield as well. If he can go ahead and stretch that, then you could do more things running the ball. And I really think that he is the key to this. It's time for him to really step up and take this team. And that is if Mike Tomlin and Randy Fichtner let him. But I really think that it's time.
Okay, so you say Mason Rudolph. Dave, who do you have as your X factor?
All right, I'm going on the other side of the ball, and I'm going to go with the Steelers' 2019 first-round pick of Devin Bush. If he can continue to improve each and every game, and if he can be there to step up against the run and defend well against the pass, against this defense, especially stepping up against their big running attack, to where he can not get caught up in traffic and make plays for not 5 yards downfield, but be able to come up and make some plays in the defense, then what are they going to do? I'm not saying that if he doesn't, then the Steelers are in trouble, but I'm saying if he does, the Ravens are in trouble.
I gave 2 X factors last night on the show, and I'll reiterate those here. I said James Washington on offense. The guy has not done really anything that we expected with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. I guess for me, it feels like they're due. And someone has to win their one-on-one matchup. And if Deontay Johnson, who's caught 2 passes in the last 2 games, is going to be getting even a little bit of extra attention, it's going to leave Washington one-on-one. He has to win that matchup. And Rudolph, like Brian Anthony Davis said, is going to have to find him and deliver a good ball. On defense, I think it's going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think that this, you look at the Dolphins game earlier where they got behind him a couple times. The Ravens offense did. He's going to have to learn from that. He's going to have a little bit of experience. He could probably be talking to the Steelers secondary about, hey, this is what this new Ravens offense is trying to do. Why? Because we already played them. I played against them earlier this year. I know from studying exactly what we're talking about. So I definitely have to understand that. Yeah, I think those 2 players are going to be difference makers in this game for good or bad, and we'll see how that pans out. Is there any matchup? Because these 2 teams are so evenly matched, I feel, even though their records may not say it. Dave, is there any matchup that you're particularly looking forward to watching?
It's honestly, it's just there's 2. It's and it's team matchup. It's the Steelers defense against Baltimore's running game. But I also really want to see what Mason Rudolph and the wide receivers can do against Baltimore's weak passing defense. So that's probably the main one I would say is the passing attack versus Baltimore's. I had it written down. I'd have to double check. They're at the very bottom of the league in pass defense.
Okay, what about you, Brian?
You know what? I mean, this has already been said, and we've talked about the fact that Devin Bush is probably going to be spying on a guy like Lamar Jackson as well. And so I'm looking at the line of the running game a little bit more. I'm looking at like Bush on Jackson, and I'm looking at Vinny Vici on a guy like Mark Ingram.
To me, I think that this matchup that I'm really looking forward to watching is the guy that I call Bud the Dud, and then also TJ Watt opposite him. And can they do their jobs in containment? I'm not necessarily focused on them. Trust me, getting sacks is amazing. It can be a killer on a drive. We saw that with Devin Bush against the Bengals on Monday Night Football. The Bengals are driving. He comes up the middle, and he absolutely ends the drive with one play. But at the same time, I want to see them keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket. Don't get pushed up the arc and give him a lane to escape. This reminds me that all those years, I remember with the Steelers on the random chance they would play the Atlanta Falcons with Michael Vick at quarterback. It reminds me a lot of those games where they would always talk about coning them in and keeping him in the pocket and doing all those things that were necessary to try to force him to throw the ball. That's what the Steelers need to do, and that's a matchup I want to watch. So, okay, for those that don't know us, we do play a lot of fantasy football. We are in a FanDuel league, the daily fantasy league, and it's a lot of fun. And we like to talk about the Steelers in this fashion. And a lot of people say, well, I don't play fantasy football. Well, you could also talk about this from a fact of you're talking about production. If you're going to play a guy in fantasy football, then you're expecting them to produce, especially in a daily league where you can pick your lineup every single time. Same if you're going to bench someone, you're not predicting them to produce. So let's talk about our fantasy picks for this week. Dave, we'll start with you. Who's a player that you are looking to start against the Ravens?
I'm going with it again. I'm going with my main man, Deontay Johnson. I think
Look at him kissing up.
yeah, Brian likes that. No, I mean, I've been playing him. I picked him up in my traditional fantasy leagues, and I've been playing him in the daily fantasy. I played him on the Monday night game, did quite well. That's not a league that we have together. That's just playing regular stuff. Ours is a Sunday league. But and how'd you guys do in that league again this week? You're both behind me. That's all I know. Sorry about that. But yeah,
I took
I
third.
like what he's doing. I like that. Well, I know you were one spot behind me. Sorry. I just like what he's doing. I like how he's getting open. I like the connection going there. I like them even handing the ball off to him some. I think he's one of those rookies, much like with Devin Bush. He's getting better every game.
What about you, Brian? Who are you starting?
I want to say James Conner. I keep saying James Conner, and that keeps blowing up on me. So I'm going to go Jalen Samuels. I really think that he is getting more involved in this offense. I think he's becoming a little bit of a weapon more. I mean, I know Connor too was catching the ball, but I really think that he's so versatile. You can do so many things with him, and I think they're really going to look his way this.
Well, you guys were down on James Conner last week, and I said I think you should take him, and I think he performed well. Jalen Samuels.
Bryan was down on him. I was not down on him. You tried to accuse me of that too. No, that wasn't me. That was Bryan.
I was.
Well, Bryan said to bench him. He was his bench player last week, and I said let's give him a chance. I think he's going to produce, and I think he did. Scored a touchdown, but Jalen Samuels took a lot of touches away too, so I could see that pick as well. For me. See, Juju's toe bothers me a little bit. The fact he hasn't practiced, but I want to know who's going to turn into the new Raven killer. Every time the Steelers play the Ravens, there's always a couple players that just always seem to step up in these games. Le'Veon Bell, or Butt Naked and Robbed, as we call him here on the show, he would always play extremely well when healthy during the Ravens. Mr. Third and Fifth, that's Antonio Brown, had his moments against Baltimore in his career in Pittsburgh. Santonio Holmes, in my opinion, was the ultimate Raven killer when it came to making big plays when it mattered most against their rivals. For me, I'm going to go with, if I have to start somebody, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this, but I might just take a flyer and say, you know what? Mason Rudolph could be a guy that you start. I mean, again, daily fantasy, putting all of this together in terms of how much they cost, potential output, it doesn't make sense on paper. This is a strict gut move here. But he's been efficient with the ball. He hasn't turned it over. He has 2 interceptions, one of which was because Dante Moncrief can't catch. The second one was his fault, but still he's been efficient, and he's also been throwing touchdowns. So keep that in mind too. So I'll say Mason Rudolph as my start. Who do you guys say you're going to sit? We'll start with Dave first.
All right. Well, I want to remind people in the live chat that when it comes to daily fantasy, these are offensive players. So I know you guys are throwing some great names out there as Ravens killers on the defensive side of the ball. And I agree with everything that I've seen so far, both past Ravens killers and who's going to step up this week. But when it comes to fantasy, that's an offensive game. So who I'm going to sit this week is I'm going to sit James Washington until he shows that he's going to do something to catch the ball down the field. Now watch it. Someone's going to take a flyer on him at some point when he hasn't done anything, and he's going to explode. So I think he's due for that explosion in the next 3 games. I'm just not sure that I'm ready to jump on it for this game. So maybe one of you guys are, but for now, I'm holding off on him until I can see that there's a little bit more going on with that. But he has been doing a fantastic job when they've called on him to block and really utilize that as part of the Wildcat this past weekend.
Brian, who are you benching this week?
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and gosh, I don't know the name of any Ravens receivers anymore. I know Marquise Brown's there. I know the kid from Notre Dame, but Willie Snead. But there's really no one to really mention. So I am going to go ahead back to the Steelers side of the ball, and I'm going to say, I don't expect Deontay Johnson to go ahead and have the week that he did last week. I believe in this guy a lot. I was actually going to go James Washington, but I don't want to copy Dave, so I'll go with Deontay.
Okay, I'm going to go with Juju because of the toe injury, because I know he's going to get extra attention if he does play. And I just think that so far the only plays he's made this year have been bang or bust, in terms of the 76-yard touchdown against San Francisco. He really hasn't gotten into a groove yet with Mason Rudolph for whatever reason. Now that can change, but I want to see more consistency from him. So I'm going to say go ahead and sit, Juju Smith-Schuster this week. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that it's a Bryan Anthony Davis and James Conner last week where you say sit him and he ends up performing well. So I'm hoping that's what happens. So, it happens to every fantasy player.
Happen.
You think exactly. So
yeah, I watch James Washington is going to go off.
Well, hey, if he does, that's awesome. Great news for
good.
Steeler fans everywhere. So keep that in the back of your mind. All right. So gone over the fantasy stuff. Let's go ahead and get into the details of gambling via Dave Schofield. Dave, what is the current spread, over, under, and all that stuff before we get to our predictions?
Oh, yeah, that probably should have been something that I had up here and ready to go.
So you told us last night was 3.5. Steelers getting 3.5, and the over-under was at 45.
Yes, that's what it was last night. I'm just double checking to make sure that did not change. I'm pretty sure I saw earlier today that it was still the 3.5. But as of right now, it is still the 3.5, and it is 44.5.
So it went down to 44.5. Okay.
Yeah, because it was 45, right?
It was 45 last night. All right. So that's definitely going down, trending in the downward direction. So Bryan, what's your prediction for this game? Give us a score.
Well, I'm actually going a lot lower than I usually do here. I'm looking at a 22-19 Steelers win.
22-19. Yeah, that's such a funny score.
I'm back.
Okay, 22-19. Dave, what is your prediction?
I'm trying to figure out how he's getting to that 22. So you're saying 5 field goals and a touchdown, or are you throwing a safety in there? Or you throwing a missed extra? Don't say a missed extra point. Things have been good in that regard. So, yeah, I'm not supposed to critique Bryan's. I'm supposed to give my own. I'm going to go with this. This game is so tough because so many people were hyped on the Ravens after a couple weeks, but then you look at the teams that they played and how they've done absolutely nothing against anybody. You're wondering, was that the real Baltimore Ravens? I think you're going to see the real Baltimore Ravens this week. So the question is, what do I think the real Baltimore Ravens are? So I'm going to say 20-17 Pittsburgh. So therefore it's the Steelers by 3. Give it to Boswell with the game winner at the end, and they will go with the under.
I said last night 30-28 Pittsburgh wins. I like Boswell to get a game winner, like you said. I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than people think. I think that Lamar Jackson is going to be every bit the athletic freak that he is. And I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to go toe-to-toe with them from a offensive standpoint because the Ravens are dynamic. I don't want people to think that this is like some crappy Ravens offense. They're dynamic in how they run the ball. They're dynamic in when Lamar Jackson has time to throw it, if he chooses to run it. Their defense is where I feel like there's some gaps. We'll put it that way. They lost a lot this past offseason. And so I think the Steelers are going to be able to move the ball. But I say 30-28 Pittsburgh wins. And Lance picked the Ravens to win last night, as I'm sure many of you know and are not surprised because everyone in the live chat says he's a Cleveland Browns fan deep down underneath all that black and gold gear. So it'll be interesting. But here's something that I wanted to ask you guys, and I've been doing this. I think it's a pretty cool, just a way to kind of smooth things over before we get to the live chat to answer some questions. This is tough with the Ravens, but when you think of the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, you think of what? Bryan, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, there's so many, but I think of Ben with a bloody nose, Mar Woodley, and Troy Polamalu late in that 2010 Sunday night December game.
Oh, that was such a dreadful offensive game. So bad. Wasn't that was the Santonio Holmes catch, right? Where they still question whether the ball was over the line.
No, that was 2008. That was on the way to the victory for the Super Bowl 43 victory. The one I'm talking about it was a Sunday night game. That was Troy's defensive MVP year, and they Ben had his nose broken in that game. I think it was T Sizzle that did it. This was the
No,
Super
it was
Bowl
Nada. Haloti
45
Nada.
year. Yeah. Oh, it was Nana. Okay.
Yeah.
But no, that was the Super Bowl 45 year.
Okay. What about you, Dave? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I recall that Brian will remember the year. I'm trying to think back. It might be the same one I'm thinking about. That crazy playoff game when they were down 3 touchdowns early, and then they just started fighting back and fighting back, which is the same one. I was actually doing
Same year,
doing
not
it
same game.
yeah. Yes, I was doing an event with some high school kids at the time. We were actually doing a progressive dinner where we were going around from house to house, and it just so we had it scheduled for a long time, but it just happened to be during the playoffs. So we had to call ahead at each one and make sure that the game was already on TV, and so that way we were actually skipping from house to house based on TV breaks and everything else like that. So, but that was just fantastic because it was almost all Ravens fans and me, and they just kept you know, chipping away, and there you go. So that's what I think of the most is where it didn't matter how big of a lead that the Ravens had that the Steelers came back on them.
I can't think about this rivalry without going to the '08 AFC Championship game, and it was so cold, and there were so many memorable plays in that game, and Troy Polamalu's interception in return for a touchdown to seal the win, and Ryan Clark's hit on Willis McGahee. I remember that game so vividly. It's incredible. And it's one of those games that I'll never forget for the rest of my life and who I was watching the game with. And it was just my cousin was at that game and he was in the upper deck and he said that when Polamalu intercepted the pass, you literally could feel the entire stadium shaking. And if you go on YouTube and just type in footage of that play from people's cell phones during the game, you can almost feel how crazy that stadium went when he. I mean, that's the biggest play you'll ever have in that stadium's history, in my opinion, based on the fact that they're never going to host a Super Bowl there. So, a AFC Championship game against your arch rivals. I mean, my goodness, that was incredible. Brian, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I have that game. But when the Troy touchdown happened, there was about 4 or 5 of us. We jumped in, scrum, hugging, and I got punched in the face in my basement. Still to this day, do not know. I have no clue which one of my buddies cracked me, but they really got me good. Punching 30 years probably. And I've hardly been punched in my face in my life, but this one, it hurt so bad, but it hurts so, and I did not care.
The other game that always is like, I guess if that's 1A, 1B, and I don't know why this one sticks out. It's probably because so few of these games are blowouts. But it was a Monday night game. They wore their throwbacks, and the Steelers were up, I believe, 35-0 at halftime. And that was the same. That was the same game that James Harrison laid out Ed Reed on a kickoff or a punt return. Heinz Ward crackbacked Ray Lewis in that game. Ben threw. I want to say he might have thrown 4 touchdowns in the first half. Brian, what year was that?
Was that 2007? Because I had that's when I moved into my house that I live in right now. I moved in the summer of 2007, and I remember because I had my brother-in-law came to watch the game with me, and his roommate who was a Ravens fan and his roommate's best friend who was a Ravens fan. We all watched the game together here at my house, and that game got so much out of hand. We just sat there quietly because we almost felt bad for the Ravens fans because they were getting smacked so bad. That was fantastic.
It was a game that it was one of the few games you could sit back and just say, "Wow, like this game's over." And the second half was so enjoyable to watch. I mean, the Ravens could do nothing. You just don't have a lot of those, you know, you just don't have a lot of those games because most of these games are those knockdown, drag out type matches, battles, football games, whatever. So, all right. There's so many games. We could probably do a whole podcast on just memorable.
I could
Ravens
go on
games.
forever about the Christmas Day game. That was
The
just
Christmas Day
something.
game, the Immaculate Extension.
yeah.
Where the winner of that game was going to win the North. I mean, that was basically a playoff game. That was fantastic.
I think that,
And
there's a play that go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry. I just I hate to extend this, but in 2006 they got blown out by the Ravens, and right after Thanksgiving, in a game in my basement by myself, with my dog, and I was so mad at the Steelers, that I turned all the bobbleheads around that were on my TV because I couldn't even look at them. Then my comes down, and she comes down and says, "Hey, is this a good time?" And I'm like, these guys are killing me. They're horrible. Yeah, what do you need? She goes, well, I could come back. I'm like, no, what's up? And she pulled out something. She pulled out a little stick test.
I know where it is.
And I found out I was going to be a father.
I knew that's what you're going to say.
The rest of that game, I found out I was going to be a father and that was the first time and the only time the Steelers lost to the Ravens, and I was elated. I didn't care the rest of the day because all that time, here I am, 34 years old, and I'm going to be a dad.
That's a great story.
That is, absolutely. Now I'm going to test Brian's dates here because it might have been the same game you mentioned earlier. But when I think about the Ravens and the Steelers, there's a play that I would say that if I could put Ben Roethlisberger's career into one play, it would be an incomplete pass. But it happened against the Ravens. And it was a game in Baltimore, and he's pressured, and they might have one timeout left or no timeouts left. And Terrell Suggs is literally hanging onto his back, and he gets out of the pocket and he flings the football to the sideline with a huge mammoth of a man on his back, and he makes the play. It didn't win. They ended up winning that game, but and then you get into like the Charlie Batch, Heath Miller, the Charlie Batch going into Baltimore and winning that game. I mean, we could go on forever, right? These games are legendary games. So,
and so few of them are on Sundays at 1:00, but that's what we got this week. So,
but hey, Jeff, we got the Bengals on Monday night. Don't worry.
Oh, well, no, that's the Browns. Browns are Monday night.
No, I'm saying.
Oh no, we got the Bengals on. I thought you meant this coming. Yeah, that was legendary. Hey, before you open up the live chat,
sure.
I'm dying. I really want to do a Steelers either or with you guys.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, because it's really what's going on in this situation. We're a quarter of the way through the NFL season, except for those couple teams that had a bye. Would you rather be going into Week 5 with a 2-2 record, with 2 straight losses, or with a 1-3 record coming off of a win?
So in other words, would you rather be the Ravens or the Steelers? Right now?
Exactly. What's your scenario there? Would you rather be going in on a losing streak? You're 500, but you're on a 2-game losing streak, or even though you struggled early, you're coming in after a pretty decisive win. Where would you rather be sitting coming into this game?
Well, if you ask Raven fans, I mean, they're ready to jump off the ledge.
Oh yeah, they're
my good buddy.
They are.
Yeah. I have to say that I would still want to be 2-2 because it's early, but at the same time, there is something about coming into the game with a little bit of momentum. And that's why I still find it strange that the Ravens are giving 3.5 points to Pittsburgh at home. Like that is a huge slap in the face to the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion. I want to say that they've only been home underdogs 2 times in the last 3 years, possibly. That I think that I saw that in the Tribune Review. Chris Adamski wrote that article. I'll have to double check that, but it's not often that the Steelers are considered home underdogs. But Brian, what would you do? Would you rather be the Ravens or the Steelers in this situation?
Well, typically I hate playing the Ravens when they've lost 2 in a row because they're just that team that I think they rise above a lot. But in this situation, I want to be 1-3 with the momentum. Steelers have momentum. It's still threat level midnight for them. You really can't lose this game. You can't be 1-4. So I think there's still a lot of desperation that we're still not talking about. With this game, that momentum. So that's why I picked them earlier. So I definitely want to be there now.
All right. So that's a good. What about you, Dave? What do you think?
I don't know how I feel. That's why I asked you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because you have the momentum situation, but then you also had the fact that, like Brian just said, going 1-4, it would be a disastrous proposition. And so the Steelers are it's a statement game. I'm not going to go as far as saying it's a must win, but it's definitely a statement game for sure. So, okay, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say this is 2 weeks in a row that the Ravens are playing an AFC North game where neither team has a win against a team that has a win. That happened last week when they played the Browns because neither of them had a win against a team that wasn't an 0 and whatever team. So and it's the same this week. So this is going to kind of be a good measuring stick for both teams.
All right, so let's get to the live chat. I already posted the question that if anyone had questions, we're going to try to do rapid fire, guys. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on these questions. I want you to get your quick synopsis, and then we'll move on and get as many questions as we can during this time. So let's go to Steve. He asks, who will have a bigger game, Deontay Johnson or James Washington? Brian, go.
Washington.
Dave?
You got me? Okay, I'll go. Then it was Deontay Johnson.
Okay, I think I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson just because history tells me a lot here. Cree asks, will Devin Bush spy Lamar Jackson? Brian, thoughts?
Yeah, I think he will.
What about you, Dave?
Oh, don't know if it'll be him all the time, but I think he'll be at least partly responsible. They might rotate between who does it.
Okay, awesome stuff. 1983 asked a question we kind of talked about earlier, but that is, what kind of game plan do you see Coach Randy coming up with this Sunday? Brian, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot like last week, maybe another wrinkle, but not any more innovative than what he's already done.
Dave?
More like Cincy, less like San Fran.
All righty. Ryan O'Toole puts $5.29 into the tip jar. He says, how much quarterback pressure will our defense get? And our guess on number of sacks on Lamar Jackson. So, Brian, go.
Let's go 3 this week.
3? Okay. Dave?
I was going to go with 4. I think you've got to have much more of a controlled rush against a quarterback like this. So it's going to change things up a little bit.
I think that the Steelers are going to get pressure, but I'm only going to go with 2 sacks this week. They're only going to get to him twice, but I think they're going to pressure him, and that's a big thing. Steelers fan 74 says, hey, Dave, how's the Survivor League stacking up? Didn't know if you have that ready or not. Dave, are you ready for that?
Well, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember what it is. There is 180 people remaining out of 592. We had a record low of people who forgot to pick their game, except when Jeff Hartman was one of those people that did that. Brian, are you still alive?
No, the Rams got me.
Oh, so you were one of the many that fell to the Rams. Overwhelming for the Chargers this past week, who they beat the Dolphins. The second most popular game was the Rams, so a lot of people got knocked out from that one. This week's going to be a tough one. There's no Dolphins. They're on bye. No one to go up against there. and some of the bigger matchups are teams that a lot of people have already used. So we're really going to start to see as it goes on, and you don't have as many choices, it's going to get tough.
Yeah, I was out of town last weekend, and it was just the last thing on my mind. And so next thing you know, it's Sunday, and I'm at a golf event watching the Ravens and the Browns on a television screen. I'm like, well, crap, I forgot my pick. Guess I'm done. And it's not too big of a deal. I didn't want the football anyways. All right, so Dominic says, will Mason Rudolph throw another 40-plus yard touchdown?
Yes.
We'll say touchdown. Brian says yes. Dave?
I'm going to say no this week.
Okay. There you go. Let's hear. Awesome stuff. 1983. Will Mason Rudolph keep his streak alive of 2 touchdowns in a game? Brian? Dave?
I'm saying yes as well.
Yeah, you bet he is, because he's awesome. That's why. Let's see here. Question from Ali says, should we give up on James Washington having a breakout game now that Jeff is no longer looking for it? Brian, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think we should give up on him. It's going to happen. It's just it's
all right. What about Dave?
Yeah, it's coming. Just the question is when. Like I said, it'll be sometime in the next 3 games, in my opinion.
Yeah. And let's go with the basic question here. Is Mason Rudolph the next franchise quarterback? Brian?
I'm going to say yes.
Whoa. Okay. Dave?
I'm going to say yes, but that does not mean that he is going to be the starter every season from this point on. It might still be another Ben season or 2 sprinkled in there, and then back to Mason. But we'll see.
We shall see indeed. So here we have it. Awesome stuff. 1983. Dave, this is for both of us, I think, because we both said it. Will you have your number 2 jersey by Sunday at 1 p.m.? My answer is no. Dave, have you already ordered yours?
I have not ordered mine yet because I was waiting for you to get yours. And Jeff, you're going to end up with one because Isaac says if you won't tell him the size, he's just going to send it what he thinks to me because he has my address because he's the one who donated the Juju jersey. So you might as well just embrace it because he's getting you a Rudolph jersey. I don't think you have much of a say in it.
Brian knows my size. He's got me a jersey before. I'm not responding. I'm not getting I'm not. If he gets it for me in a round, if he does all that legwork to get that, then that's fine. But at the same time, like again, I'm not poor. I said that in my other show. I'm not poor. Here's a good question, and this is a great one for you guys because you've been to more games than I have, and we get this question a lot. Any tips for my first Steelers game, especially since it's against the Ravens? That's from Michael Toole. Or 2L. I'm not sure how you say that last name. Dave, go ahead. What are your tips to first game?
I always say make sure you get there early enough to walk the whole stadium, to go through in the concourse. Make sure you hit that because you're where the Great Hall is and where the Hall of Honor and all that's on the one level. You have to go up escalators to get to the rest of the way around. Go all the way around to the Ford fan zone, see what former Steeler they have there to meet. Even before you go in, I usually take the Gateway Clipper and come in right there at the front of the stadium, but I walk around the side on what is that? Is it Rooney Avenue or Rooney Boulevard? I'm going to mess that up. Rooney something, where they always have all kinds of tents and other stuff going on out there. But just take it all in.
Brian, anything to add that you would do?
Yeah, don't drive around the stadium thinking you're going to park right there. Like Dave said with the Gateway Clipper, you're going to be walking a good bit to park unless you take them, but it's tough to find parking because those parking garages are now for season pass holders. So with that being said, when you walk in the stadium, I always tell people, make sure you go in front and to go in the front of the stadium and walk in, and as it opens up around you, just breathe it all in. Feels like a religious experience if you're a huge Steeler fan.
I agree. I don't know why this guy DBS615, he asked in the live chat, "Yo Jeff, do you deadlift sumo or conventional?" I'm a conventional deadlifter. I don't like sumo deadlift. But that's just me. Sumo.
I can't stand. I'm so against deadlift. It's not funny. It's not a. any lift that you can lift more weight when you do it with the wrong technique isn't. Well, this is me as a high school coach because kids would want to keep saying, "Oh, I can deadlift this," but it's because they weren't doing it right. So I'm sorry. I'm anti deadlift. I'm sorry.
Deadlifting, period, or sumo deadlift?
Deadlifting, period.
Yeah, well then I disagree with that 100%.
It's just too much.
I've deadlifted a sandwich before.
There you go. That's good. Trey says can't go the whole show without it. # poor Jeff. Thank you, Trey. I appreciate that.
Poor Jeff.
Steve chimes in. Steve gives a little bit more detail. He says Jeff's just below middle class, but not poor. That's true. I am not poor. Let's see here. People are now figuring out how I could get away with both my Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph infatuations. They said, get a Zach Banner jersey, the 7 and the 2. Problem solved. I love the creativity there, Reed. I appreciate that. All right. So I think it's a good way to end the show. So for me, I think it's, I like the fact that Lance didn't pick the Steelers, although I think that sometimes he embraces that heel aspect a little too much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we all have differing views on how this game's going to pan out. So make sure you check us out on all our other shows. So to give you the rundown, tomorrow night, Friday night, Lance will be on for his Yeah, I Said It. Saturday, is it you, Brian, this week for the Steelers? Okay, so Brian's on for the Steelers burning question. And then Sunday, Lance and I will be on after the Ravens and Steelers play at 1 p.m. for our Steelers post-game show. And the next week is a regular week. Steelers hangover on Monday. $2 for the thank you, Snowman. $2 for Jeff's Mason Rudolph jersey. And Dave will be on Tuesday for the Steelers Stat Geek. And then obviously we'll be on with the Standard on Wednesday, and there we go. So ultimately, guys, we hope that everyone has a great weekend. We hope that it's capped off by a Pittsburgh Steelers victory. And remember, check out BehindTheSteelCurtain.com for all your Pittsburgh Steelers needs. It's a one-stop shop. It really is. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. If you haven't already, go to youtube.com, search BTSC Steelers Radio, hit the subscribe button. And anywhere where you download podcasts, just search Behind the Steel Curtain or Steelers to find us. And if you're on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating and a good comment. It helps us with our exposure. So make sure you check us out all throughout this weekend on all our podcasts, but make sure you also check us out Steelers post-game after the game. That's always a fun one with myself and Lance. As Lance always says, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. We'll see you next week.